If you're hearing this, don't go near the lake. I don't care how curious you are, I don't care what you've read online, and I don't care if your friends are daring you. Curiosity is a knife that cuts both ways, and on that night, it carved something out of me that I will never get back, that I'm sitting here in a place that shouldn't exist anymore. The wallpaper is peeling like rotting skin, the floor groans with every breath I take, and the air, God, the air smells damp and sour, as if the lake itself has found its way into the walls. I can still hear water dripping even though it hasn't rained in weeks. The mansion doesn't let you forget the lake. It doesn't let you forget anything that I wasn't supposed to stay this long. It was only supposed to be a joke, a dare, something we'd laugh about later. But the longer I sit in this decaying shell, the more I understand that jokes don't last here. Laughter doesn't belong here. Nothing human does that. I saw something earlier, and no matter how many times I blink, I can't unsee it. It was standing in the upstairs window, framed against the cracked glass. It looked like a person, but not quite. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted in a way that suggested it had been studying me far longer than I'd been studying it. And the worst part? When I looked away for half a second and glanced back, the curtain moved, as if it had stepped back inside that I should leave. Every nerve in my body screams at me to run, but when I grip the doorknob, it doesn't turn. I've tried every exit. They all lead me back to the same room. The same rotten smell, the same faint sound of water lapping against the boards. The house wants me here, and if you think that sounds insane, then good. Hold on to that skepticism, because once you believe the house notices you, it's already too late. That my friends. God, my friends thought this was hilarious. Just one night, they said, "Prove you're not a coward," they said. I wonder if they're still out there, waiting by the campfire, expecting me to walk back with some funny ghost story. They don't know the truth. They don't know what's inside, but you will. You're going to hear it all, whether you want to or not, because I can't carry this weight alone. If I don't tell someone, the house wins. Maybe it wins anyway. So listen carefully, because every detail matters. Every step I took, every word I ignored, every warning I brushed off, it all led me here, to this suffocating room with dripping walls and whispers in the dark. And if you're smart, you'll stop now. You'll turn this off. You'll pretend the mansion on the lake is nothing but a rumor. But if you keep listening, then don't say I didn't warn you, because the truth starts long before I ever set foot inside. And to understand what's happening to me now, we have to go back to the night of the dare that shouldn't have happened. The lake was the kind of place you'd drive past without giving it a second thought. Calm, still, framed by tall pines that swayed gently in the wind. In the daytime, it looked almost inviting, sunlight scattered across the water like shards of glass. Birds skimming its surface, the air fresh with the kind of silence you only get in places far removed from highways and strip malls. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was peaceful, but beauty is only skin deep. The town that huddled a few miles down the road didn't talk about the lake the way they talked about fishing or weather. They lowered their voices when its name came up, glanced at each other nervously, like kids caught whispering about something they swore they'd never mention again. If you pressed them, they'd laugh, say it was just old stories, nothing serious. But the laughter didn't reach their eyes. And if you kept pushing, if you leaned in and asked what those stories were, they stopped talking altogether. I learned that the hard way. The first time I asked about the mansion that sat on the far side of the water, the waitress at the diner froze mid-pour, coffee spilling over the edge of my cup. She muttered something about keeping curiosity on a leash, then walked away without looking back. The locals always stopped talking when I asked too many questions. That's how I first realized the mansion wasn't just some abandoned property. It was a wound, and the town had learned to live with the scar by pretending it wasn't there. Still, I couldn't ignore it. No one could, really. The mansion loomed on the northern shore, half hidden by trees, but always watching. In daylight, its blackened windows glinted like blind eyes reflecting the sun, and at dusk, at dusk, it was worse. That I remember standing by the lake one evening, watching as the sun sank low. The water caught every shade of fire, red, gold, orange, until the surface looked alive, rippling with warmth. And there, in the reflection, the mansion appeared darker than it had any right to be. Not just shadowed, but black, as if it absorbed the light and offered nothing back. It was the kind of contrast that made your stomach twist, like staring at a photo where something's just slightly off. That's when the stories started echoing in my head. Not from the townsfolk. They never gave me details, but from scraps I picked up online, whispered forums, and half-deleted threads. They called it the house that watches, the lake's mouth, the place that remembers. Someone claimed if you stared long enough at the reflection, you'd see things moving in the windows. Others swore the lake itself rose higher every time someone tried to tear the house down, swallowing the land until the workers left it alone. It was easy to dismiss as internet nonsense. Easy until I stood there by myself, dusk settling heavy, and swore I saw a curtain shift even though the house was too far to make out such details. I told myself it was wind, but the windows were closed, and that's the problem with rumors. They spread like mold, and once you breathe them in, they linger. No matter how much you try to laugh them off, part of you starts to wonder, what if? I should have turned back then. I should have listened to the diner waitress, the gas station clerk who told me don't drive that way at night, the old man on the pier who shook his head when I asked about the mansion and muttered, the water remembers. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in, curious. Too curious. Because when my friends started talking about the mansion, half daring, half mocking, I didn't argue. I didn't remind them of the warnings or the strange silences. I just laughed along, pretending it didn't bother me, pretending I wasn't already haunted by the reflection I'd seen. That's how these things start. Not with screams or shadows, but with curiosity wrapped in a dare. And once the dare is spoken aloud, once someone says, let's spend the night in the mansion, you can feel the hook set deep, tugging you toward a place you should never go. That we told ourselves it was harmless. Just one night. We'd bring flashlights, food, maybe even a bottle or two. We'd laugh in the face of old stories, prove we weren't afraid of rumors. But deep down, I knew better. The lake had been waiting. The mansion had been watching. And when we crossed that shoreline, we weren't just stepping into an old house. We were stepping into something that had been patient, something that had been hungry. And it all began with the dare. There were 5 of us that night. 5 idiots who thought we were braver than the rest of the town. Braver than the warnings, braver than the silence that always hung around the lake. Looking back, I wonder if the mansion smiled when it saw us coming. There was Tyler, the ringleader. He always had to be the loudest voice in the room, the one pushing boundaries, daring people to prove themselves. His grin could convince you to do almost anything, even when you knew better. Especially when you knew better. Then there was Jess, sharp, sarcastic, never missing a chance to cut Tyler down a peg. She wasn't with us to believe in the dare. She was there to make sure she had front row seats when it inevitably went wrong. Mark was quieter, the kind of guy who stuck to the background. He laughed at Tyler's jokes, nodded along, but I always noticed the way his eyes shifted away when things got too real. If anyone had truly wanted to back out, it would have been him. But none of us gave him that chance. And then there was Sarah. Sarah, with the kind of laugh that made you forget how heavy the world felt. She was the reason I didn't immediately shoot the idea down. She said she wanted to see the mansion for herself, to prove it was all just stories. And when she looked at me for backup, I couldn't bring myself to say no. Stupid, I know. But when someone like Sarah asks you to come along, you don't argue. You follow. Finally, there was me. The cautious one. The one who laughed along to hide the knot in my stomach. We sat around the campfire on the lakeshore, flames snapping, shadows reaching long behind us. Tyler was the one who first brought it up. Bet none of you have the guts, he said, poking at the fire with a stick. Spend the night in the mansion. Just one night. That's all. Jess snorted. Oh, please. You'd last 10 minutes before crying for your mommy. Tyler smirked, pointing across the fire at me. Nah, not me. Him. He's the one who needs to prove he's not scared. The spotlight burned, and I forced a laugh. Why me? Because you're the one always asking questions, Tyler shot back. Always poking around, wanting to know more about the stories. Guess what? Tonight, you get your answers. The others laughed, and I laughed too. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Not then. Sarah leaned closer, her smile catching the firelight. Come on, it'll be fun. Just a night in an old house. What's the worst that could happen? Those words should have been a warning, but they weren't. They were a promise I wanted to believe in. The group's banter spun out from there. Jess betting Tyler wouldn't make it past the front door. Mark muttering he'd only go if everyone else did. Sarah teasing me about bringing snacks like it was a picnic. On the surface, it was all jokes and laughter, but underneath, there were cracks. Jess's sarcasm hid nerves. Mark's silence was heavier than anyone noticed, and Sarah's playful tone carried a thread of challenge I couldn't ignore. Peer pressure is a funny thing. No one says it outright, but it's there in every glance, every laugh, every dare that gets tossed into the flames. And that night, none of us wanted to be the one who backed down. So when Tyler stood up and said, "Let's go," we went. Like moths to a flame, like children creeping into the woods after being told not to, that we left the safety of the fire behind, its warmth fading with every step toward the tree line. The mansion waited on the other side of the lake, its silhouette already visible against the twilight. It didn't look like a house. It looked like a black tooth jutting up from the earth, sharp and rotting all at once. No one spoke much as we walked. The bravado of the campfire had burned away, leaving only the crunch of dead leaves underfoot and the hush of the lake lapping at the shore. When the trees finally broke and the iron gates of the mansion loomed before us, we stopped. Rust streaked the bars like old blood, and the path beyond was swallowed by shadow. Tyler grinned, gripping the gate as if it were a prize. "Well," he said, "here we are." And just like that, the dare became real. The gates shrieked when Tyler shoved them open, a sound so sharp it made my teeth ache. Rust flaked off onto his hands, and he wiped them on his jeans like it didn't matter. None of us said a word as we stepped onto the path. It felt like crossing some invisible border, one of those places where the air itself changes once you step through. The mansion towered above us, its windows black pits, its roof sagging under the weight of decades. Up close, it didn't look abandoned so much as waiting. The front doors gave way with a push that was too easy for something so old, as if the house had been expecting us. Inside, the air was thick, damp, sour, the scent of mildew mixing with something metallic. Dust floated in lazy spirals where our flashlights cut through the darkness. The entryway stretched wide, a grand staircase rising like a spine in the center, flanked by rooms yawning open on either side. Once, this place must have been beautiful. You could see it in the bones of the house, the sweeping banister carved with intricate detail, the cracked marble tiles on the floor, the chandelier hanging low with crystal teeth dulled by grime. Time had stopped here, but not in the peaceful way of an old photograph. It was a frozen moment that felt wrong, brittle, like glass about to shatter. We spread out slowly, our footsteps echoing too loudly against the hollow silence. Jess brushed dust off an old chair and muttered, "Home sweet home." No one laughed. There were little things that stood out immediately, things that didn't belong in a place left to rot. In the corner, a child's toy train rested on its side, its paint still bright, as if it had been abandoned only yesterday. On the wall, a cluster of photographs, their frames tarnished but the faces inside disturbingly clear. A family, parents, children, frozen in stiff smiles. The mother's eyes followed me when I moved. I told myself it was just the angle. Mark lingered near a portrait that dominated the wall above the staircase. A man in an old-fashioned suit, painted in oils so vivid they seemed to glisten even in the dim light. His eyes, unlike the faded photographs, looked freshly painted, wet almost. "Too alive, creepy," Mark muttered, taking a step back that we thought the house was empty. We were wrong. At first it was small things, easy to dismiss. A door at the end of the hallway creaked open just enough to show a sliver of darkness, though none of us had touched it. The chandelier overhead swayed slightly, as if stirred by a breeze, but the air was perfectly still. Somewhere deeper in the house, a faint drip echoed, steady and patient. Tyler, of course, pushed forward with a cocky grin. "This isn't so bad. Just dusty. You guys are acting like we're in a horror movie." "Yeah," Jess shot back, "the kind where the idiot dies first." Sarah nudged me, smiling faintly, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She was braver than most of us, but even she couldn't hide the way her eyes darted to every shadow that we moved into the parlor, our lights revealing furniture shrouded in white sheets. They bulged in odd shapes, making it too easy to imagine figures sitting beneath them. Tyler yanked one off dramatically, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Beneath it, the couch was pristine, the cushions oddly plump, as if someone had just stood up. No one wanted to sit down. I kept noticing how the house seemed to breathe. The way the air shifted, the faint groan of wood as if it were adjusting to our weight. Every time I turned my head, I expected to see someone standing in the doorway. Then came the smell. Stronger now, not just mildew, but something like stagnant pond water. It clung to us, thick in our throats. "Ugh, it stinks," Sarah whispered. Mark shone his light upward. Do you hear that?" At first, it sounded like the settling of old pipes. But the longer we listened, the more it resembled water dripping, steady, rhythmic, coming from above. Jess shook her head. "There's no way this place has running water." But the sound persisted, louder now, as though something was moving from room to room above us. That I glanced at the staircase again. The portrait of the suited man seemed different somehow. His mouth looked curled, almost smirking. I blinked hard, but the expression didn't change back. Every nerve in my body screamed to leave, but Tyler was already halfway up the first few steps, his flashlight bobbing. "Come on," he called. "Let's see what's upstairs." That was when it happened, the sound we couldn't ignore. A sudden bang, sharp and violent, echoed from the second floor. It wasn't the creak of wood or the shift of a door. It was a deliberate sound, like something heavy slamming shut. Sarah gasped. Jess swore under her breath. Mark muttered, "Nope, nope, nope, nope." I felt my stomach drop, the air in my lungs turning heavy. The drip had stopped. The house was silent again, but it was the kind of silence that waits. Tyler turned to us with that same reckless grin. "Guess we're not alone after all." And with that, we followed him up the stairs, into the darkness that was waiting. That we argued about it, of course. Splitting up never sounded like a good idea, but someone had to say it. That someone, naturally, wasn't me. It was Tyler. He leaned against the banister like he owned the place, smirking at the rest of us like we were extras in some low-budget horror flick. "Look, it's a mansion. We'll cover more ground in pairs. Otherwise, we'll be here all night." His tone was casual, dismissive. That smug grin of his made it sound like he was daring anyone to challenge him. Nobody wanted to give him the satisfaction that I remember muttering under my breath. "Yeah, because that's never ended badly." Emily heard me. She laughed, though it wasn't genuine. It was the nervous kind that cracks under pressure, the kind you can't quite control. I envied her ability to keep smiling. Even if it was forced. So, we paired off. Tyler and Emily took the basement. Maria and Jordan claimed the kitchen and dining area. That left me with Sam, quiet, thoughtful Sam. Heading upstairs, the staircase groaned under our weight, every step threatening to break. My hand brushed the railing and came back coated in dust thick as ash. It clung to my skin like it didn't want to let go. Sam whispered, "Does it feel heavier up here to you?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant until I realized my chest felt tight. The air was dense, humid, like something was pressing down on us. My flashlight beam cut across faded wallpaper, peeling in strips that curled like dried skin. That we passed a row of doors, most cracked open as if inviting us in. The carpet was so rotten it collapsed in patches under our shoes. It felt like walking on damp sponge. That was when I heard it, faint at first, then louder. A whisper, like someone trying to speak through water. Sam froze beside me. "You hear that?" he asked. "Yeah." We both stood there, straining to catch the words. It wasn't English. Or maybe it was, just drowned in static, like a bad radio signal. My stomach nodded. I didn't want to admit it, but I recognized the cadence. It almost sounded like laughter. Sam's grip tightened on the flashlight. Maybe it's Tyler screwing with us. I wanted to believe that. God, I did. But Tyler wasn't upstairs. That we pushed forward anyway. One room at the end of the hall drew us in. The door was half closed, and behind it, something glimmered. Inside, the walls were lined with children's drawings. Crude stick figures, houses, trees, all scrawled in waxy crayon. They should have been innocent. But every figure, every house, was half submerged, drawn sinking into jagged blue scribbles of water. Sam bent down and picked up a notebook from the floor. A diary, the cover swollen from water damage. He flipped carefully through the first few pages, mostly childish scrawl about chores, friends, and days at the lake. But halfway through, the handwriting changed. The letters grew bigger, more frantic. Only one entry was clear enough to read. "It comes from the water. We can't keep it out. The house keeps it. The house wants it." Sam's lips moved as he read it aloud, his voice shaking. I stopped him before he could finish the next line. "Don't," I said, sharper than I meant to. He looked at me, startled. but I couldn't explain why. I just knew that hearing those words aloud felt like crossing some line we weren't supposed to touch. That's when we saw it. Movement at the far end of the hallway. A shape, half hidden in the dark, like the outline of a person standing just beyond the reach of our flashlights. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might give us away. "Hello," Sam called. The shape didn't answer. It swayed, ever so slightly, as if it were breathing. Then the flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I swear the hallway stretched longer, the figure farther away yet somehow closer at the same time. Sam grabbed my arm. "We should." He didn't get to finish. A loud crash shook the floorboards beneath us, echoing up from the basement. Emily's scream cut through the mansion like a blade. I turned back toward the hallway. The figure was gone. We didn't need to say it. We ran. I thought the crash in the basement would be the worst thing we heard that night. I was wrong. By the time Sam and I scrambled down the stairs, the others were already shouting over each other. Tyler was red-faced, cursing, his shirt ripped across the shoulder. Emily was pale, shaking so hard she dropped her flashlight twice. Maria and Jordan stood near the dining room, silent, eyes darting like they were waiting for something to leap out of the shadows. N01 gave a clear answer about what happened. Tyler claimed something shoved him in the dark. Emily swore she saw hands, wet hands, reach for her from the walls. Maria muttered something about water in the pantry before Tyler barked at her to shut up, and then we noticed it. Wet footprints. Not ours. They were too small, too narrow, as if a child had padded barefoot across the warped wooden floor. The prints trailed from the basement door, through the hallway, and up the staircase we had just come down. The wood still glistened like it had been freshly mopped. "Okay," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. "Which one of you brought a bucket of water for the scare factor?" Nobody answered. Sam crouched, touching one of the prints. He pulled his hand back, trembling. "It's cold. Really cold. That should have been impossible." The air inside the mansion was stifling, almost fever hot, but the water on his fingertips dripped like ice. Above us, something tapped. Then again, a steady dripping sound. We tilted our heads back, flashlights sweeping the ceiling, and there it was, water. Dark, dirty streaks forming on the plaster, running in rivulets where no pipes existed. I knew this house was old enough that half the plumbing had probably rusted to dust. But this wasn't a leak. It wasn't possible, Jordan whispered. "It's coming from the attic." We all froze at that. Nobody wanted to be the one to suggest going up there. Instead, we stood in a suffocating silence. That's when the splashing started. At first, it sounded distant, like kids playing in a pool somewhere down by the lake. Then louder, closer, until it was as if something was thrashing in water directly inside the walls. The house groaned, boards straining under the sound, as if trying to contain the impossible flood within it. Emily backed away, shaking her head. No, it can't. Don't say it," Tyler snapped. His voice cracked, betraying the fear beneath his anger. I remembered the diary then. Its jagged words, written in frantic scrawl. "It comes from the water. We can't keep it out. The house keeps it. The house wants it, but it wasn't the house that wanted it inside. It was whatever lived in the lake, and the worst part? The diary never said what it was, only that it wanted inside. Maybe we should leave," Maria said, her voice so faint it barely registered. Tyler turned on her like a cornered dog. "What? Run out into the dark? With that lake staring at us? No thanks." But before anyone could argue further, Jordan started to say something. "We can't just stay here." The rest of his sentence never came. His flashlight clattered to the floor, beam rolling wildly across the walls, and Jordan was gone. No scream. No thud. No sound at all. Just gone, as if something had swallowed him whole in the middle of his words. We shouted his name, scoured the hallway, even checked the stairs. Nothing. Not a single sign he had ever stood among us. That was when the panic truly set in. Jordan's disappearance tore something open in the group. Whatever thread had kept us tied together snapped in that instant. Emily screamed his name until her throat cracked, her flashlight beam whipping across empty corners as if sheer will could drag him back. Maria dropped to her knees, rocking like she was trying to convince herself he hadn't just dissolved into thin air. Even Tyler looked rattled, and Tyler never looked rattled. Me? I just stood there, staring at the spot where Jordan had been, waiting for him to come back, for someone to admit it was all a trick. But no one did. That was when I realized it. The footprints had changed. The wet little smears on the floorboards no longer led upstairs. They now circled us, looping around like something had been pacing in silence, watching. "We need to stick together," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, but sticking together didn't help, because the house, or the lake, or whatever tied them together, had already chosen us. That we tried to search for Jordan anyway. Room by room, we tore through the mansion, our nerves unraveling with every creak of the floorboards, every cold draft that touched our necks. That I in one bedroom. Maria stopped dead, pointing at the dresser mirror. "Look." We crowded around. The reflection showed all of us, except Jordan was there, too, standing at the back, smiling. Not the nervous smile he always wore, but something wide, stretched, wrong. Emily gasped and spun around. Of course, no one was behind us. But in the mirror, Jordan didn't move. His smile only grew. Tyler cursed and yanked the mirror off the dresser, smashing it to the floor. The glass cracked, but didn't shatter completely. I could still see Jordan's grin twisted across a jagged shard, as if the house refused to let him go. That was the first time Maria broke. She bolted from the room, shouting, "I'm not staying in here. I'm not staying." Her voice cut off mid-sentence. Just like Jordan, by the time we stumbled out into the hall, there was nothing left of her. No scream, no footsteps running away, just silence. And then the laughter. It started faint, echoing down the hall, Maria's laugh. Except it wasn't joyful. It was hollow, mocking, like the sound of someone drowning while still trying to convince you they were fine. Emily covered her ears and sobbed. Tyler slammed his fist into the wall until his knuckles split. I wanted to do something, anything, but my body felt locked in place, frozen in terror. That we regrouped in what must have been the master bedroom. Dusty curtains hung heavy over tall windows, and the air smelled faintly of mildew and something rotten. On the nightstand sat another diary, half buried under yellowed newspapers. Sam opened it, his hands trembling so violently I thought he'd tear the pages. The handwriting was more jagged than the earlier entries, ink blotted like it had been written in haste. I read over his shoulder. "The words are burned into me now. We fed the lake because the house demanded it. It wanted us to bring them here. Friends, travelers, strangers, it didn't matter. The water never stayed satisfied. It always wanted more." I whispered, "Fed the lake." Sam flipped further, his breathing ragged. "There's more." I almost told him to stop. I almost begged him to close the damn book and throw it into the rotting fireplace. But I didn't, and I regret that. Because what I read next, I wish I hadn't. The lake does not take the body first. It takes the shadow. That is why they vanish. That is why they laugh in the halls. Their bodies follow later. The house keeps them until it's ready to deliver them back. The room spun around me. I looked toward the window, hoping for some shred of the outside world to anchor me. But the reflection in the glass showed something different. More people in the room than we had left. Dark, faceless silhouettes standing shoulder to shoulder behind us. When I turned, the room was empty. Just me, Sam, Emily, and Tyler. Emily's voice cracked. "It's not just the house. It's the water. It wants us." And then she was gone. One moment she was clutching my sleeve so tightly it left bruises. The next my arm swung free. Her flashlight hit the floor, rolling in a slow arc until it stopped at Tyler's feet. That I couldn't breathe. The air felt like liquid in my lungs, heavy and suffocating. Sam clutched my arm. "We have to leave. Now." For once, Tyler didn't argue. He just nodded, his face pale, his bravado stripped away. That we ran for the front door. My hands shook as I grabbed the brass knob and yanked it open, desperate for the cool night air, for the gravel path back to town. But outside wasn't the town. It wasn't even the porch. It was the lake, stretching black and endless, water lapping at the threshold like it had been waiting for us to open the door. The reflection of the mansion rippled across its surface. And in those ripples, faces stared back. Jordan, Maria, Emily, smiling. Behind me, Sam whispered, "It's not letting us go." And the door slammed shut. And we didn't stop running after the door slammed. Not until we were halfway down a corridor I swore we'd never entered before. The wallpaper here was a deep maroon, peeling in strips, and the floorboards bowed under our weight. But when I looked up, my stomach dropped. I knew this hallway. It was the same one we'd sprinted down 10 minutes earlier. "Wait," Sam panted, doubling over. "Didn't we just?" Tyler shook his head violently. No, That's not possible. We went left, then right. This can't be the same place. But it was. I recognized the cracks in the ceiling plaster, the burned-out wall sconce hanging by a single rusted screw. We had looped back without ever turning around. We tried another route, through the kitchen, down a back staircase, across a dining hall with shattered chandeliers. Every path led us in circles, dragging us back to the same hallway, the same set of rooms. The mansion wasn't just a house anymore. It was a maze, and we were the mice. I tested the windows next, hoping for any glimpse of freedom. But when I pushed the curtain aside, my blood ran cold. The view outside wasn't the night we'd entered into. It was dawn, the first light stretching across the black surface of the lake. I ran to another window, yanking open warped shutters. This one showed the lake at noon, sun blazing high above water that shimmered like broken glass. The next window showed the lake at dusk, and the next. At midnight, every window, every angle, a different slice of time. The lake forever staring back. Tyler slammed his fist against the glass, but the reflection didn't even shiver. His voice cracked when he muttered, "We're not getting out, are we?" That's when it hit me. The dare. Tyler hadn't come up with it on his own. None of us had. We thought we'd been joking, egging each other on like kids too proud to back down. But the idea had been planted, whispered into us, long before we ever stood on that porch. "It wasn't our choice to come here," I said, the words tasting like poison. "It never was." Sam looked at me, wide-eyed, as if I'd spoken something he'd already suspected but hadn't wanted to say out loud. "And you? Yes. You listening to this now? You've heard the rumors, haven't you? About the mansion by the lake. About the dares. About the people who go in and never come back. You already know what comes next. You've probably told the story at a campfire or in some dimly lit bedroom at 3 a.m., laughing as though it's just another ghost tale. But it isn't. It's a cycle, a trap, and it's been waiting for you, too." The proof was in the walls themselves. Literally, we found it when Sam leaned against a section of rotting plaster, and it gave way with a hollow crack. Behind it, stuffed into the frame like it had been hidden on purpose, was a final page from the diary. The paper was brittle, stained almost black with water damage. But the words were legible. We tried to warn them, but the house always calls new ones. The lake gives the dare, the house keeps the bodies. If you are reading this, it is already too late. You were never outsiders. You were always meant to be inside. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. Tyler read the words over my shoulder, his lips trembling. For once, he didn't have a sarcastic comment. For once, he was silent, and that silence was worse than any scream. The final diary page shook in my hands like it wanted to wriggle free. The ink, smeared by water, seemed almost alive, letters bleeding outward, words distorting until I blinked them back into focus. Sam leaned closer. "What does it say?" I swallowed hard and read aloud, though every syllable scraped like glass in my throat. "This house was ours once. We built it high above the lake, thinking we were safe from its reach. But the lake always finds a way. It took us, one by one, beneath its black surface. We drowned, but we did not stay drowned." I stopped, my voice faltering. The next line felt heavier, like it had been written in desperation. "We came back, not to life, but to the house. We are tied here, as long as the lake is tied to us." The room pressed in around us. The wallpaper seemed to ripple, as though the very walls were holding their breath. Sam whispered. "They didn't escape." I shook my head, forcing myself to continue. "The thing in the water was older than us. Older than the town, older than the lake itself. It wanted children first. We gave it ours. They laughed as they sank. They laugh still, but the hunger never ended." A child's laughter drifted down the hallway then, faint but unmistakable. Emily's voice, or was it Maria's? I couldn't tell anymore. The sound twisted, echoing through the rotting beams, playful and cruel all at once. Tyler cursed under his breath, his bravado shredded. He paced the room, dragging his hands through his hair like he could tear out what he'd just heard. "This is bullsh*t. It's some old ghost story." But I could hear the cracks in his voice. He didn't believe it. Not really. The next line silenced him. "We fed the lake because it demanded it. The house is its altar. Every soul brought inside is an offering. Every dare, every disappearance, part of the cycle." The paper seemed to pulse in my hand, as though the words themselves were aware I was reading them. I had to force my eyes to finish. The lake doesn't want the house. It wants us. Always us. And it will call again when it grows hungry. Sam stumbled back like he'd been struck. Tyler pressed himself against the wall, muttering no, no, no under his breath. And me? I felt hollow, like the truth had carved out something inside me and filled it with ice. Because this wasn't random. We hadn't just been dumb kids pulled in by a dare. We were chosen, called, fed to something ancient and patient. The laughter swelled again, bubbling like water through the halls. I caught a flicker in the cracked mirror across the room. 3 children, their clothes soaked, hair plastered to their pale faces. They were smiling, hands reaching toward me, mouths opening as if to sing. Their innocence was worse than any monster. They looked like victims, but their eyes glistened with something bottomless, something that had stared up from the lake for centuries. And then Tyler vanished, in a warning, no scream. One heartbeat, he was there, trembling and broken. The next, the space he'd occupied was empty. His flashlight rolled in a lazy circle, its beam catching the wall just long enough for me to see water stains spreading outward in the shape of grasping hands. Sam grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "We're next," he rasped. "Don't you get it? We're next." But before I could answer, the lights of his flashlight flickered, and when the beam steadied, he was gone too. The diary slipped from my shaking fingers, landing face down on the floor. The silence that followed was worse than the laughter, because I was alone now, alone with the whispers in the walls, alone with the sound of wet feet padding closer, slow and deliberate. I didn't need to turn to know what came next. The diary had already told me. This wasn't an ending. It was a cycle, and now I was part of it. The footsteps came first, wet, deliberate, slapping against the boards as though someone was walking barefoot through the halls. They circled me the way the footprints had earlier, patient, unhurried. Knowing there was nowhere left for me to go, I backed into the wall, clutching my flashlight like it was a weapon, though the beam had begun to sputter and dim. The air grew thick, humid, briny, like I was already standing at the bottom of the lake. Then it appeared, not in front of me, not behind me, everywhere. The walls swelled and wept, black water pouring from the cracks, filling the wallpaper with shifting shadows. Faces pressed through the plaster. Jordan, Maria, Emily, Tyler, Sam, all of them grinning through a veil of dripping rot. Their mouths moved in unison, but the voices that came out weren't theirs. They were layered, ancient, a choir of something that had lived in the lake long before the mansion was built. "We are waiting," it said, not with words, exactly, but with the weight of a tide crashing into me. I ran. God help me, I ran. The house shifted around me, hallways folding in on themselves, staircases looping like Mobius strips. Every door I opened led back to the same place, a window overlooking the lake at some impossible hour. Dawn, midnight, dusk, all at once, and always, the reflection in the water stared back. Sometimes it was just me. Sometimes it was all of us. Sometimes it was something else entirely. Something with too many eyes, too many mouths. That I stumbled into the main hall, gasping, my chest on fire. The front door loomed ahead, warped and swollen like it had been underwater for years. I yanked it open, and the lake rushed in, not the surface of it, the weight of it. Black water exploding through the doorway, sweeping me off my feet, dragging me under before I had time to scream. That I don't remember surfacing. I don't remember breathing. All I remember is sinking, the cold eating into my bones. Shadows swirling around me in the shape of my friends, their mouths still smiling, still laughing. And then, silence. I woke up on the gravel path outside the mansion. Alone, shivering, drenched, lungs burning with every ragged breath. The house loomed behind me, its windows dark, its silhouette reflected perfectly in the still water of the lake. That I don't know if I escaped. Some nights, when I try to sleep, I hear dripping in the corners of my room. Wet footprints appear on my floor, too small to be mine. My reflection lingers a second too long in the mirror, smiling when I'm not. Oh, maybe I never left. Maybe the lake just let me go long enough to tell you this. If you're hearing me now, don't go near the lake. Don't take the dare. Don't even whisper about the mansion, because the thing in the water is patient, and it already knows your name.